Welcome to the Purpose for Life podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Roberts, author of It's Deeper Than That and founder of The Great Reconnection. I'm excited to have with us today Dr. Melissa Crum. I know you're going to be inspired listening her today, and thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Crum.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I know Dr. Crum. I attended some of her book clubs about books with complex things in them. And I know the work that she does. It's powerful and amazing through her company, Mosaic Education Network, and her skill at bringing communities, cultures, and organizations together to help people truly thrive, not just check off boxes, but create practices and protocols to be able to thrive. But what I didn't know was that she started out in animation. So, can you talk about your journey? And I know this is a big question and you can break it apart, but going from animation to Mosaic Education Network, because that's a journey and the ability for you to pivot and change and grow and to sustain and develop and design is amazing to me. So, let's start with animation.
Yeah, I love watching movies, and I was fascinated by 3D animation. I feel like the first one that I remember watching was Toy Story, and I got really interested in that work. And I came to Ohio State to get a degree in animation, and DreamWorks came to work with us, which was really exciting. And they screened Shark's Tale. It's a movie that occurs underwater. Everybody's an animal, but it was clear that we were supposed to racialize some of those animals. You saw Will Smith, who we know is voiced by Will Smith, and we know Will Smith is a black man, but it was like we're supposed to read his fish also as a black man. So his introduction to us, he has his hat turned, like his baseball hat turned backwards. He has his gold chain. He cites this like Wu-Tang or like Method Man lyric, and it's like, huh, okay. The jellyfish had this like these interesting Caribbean accents. The sharks was doing this kind of Italian mafia stereotype, and I got really interested around what's the role of media and how it shapes stories for different groups of people for its viewers. And there just wasn't any space in that program for me to explore that. They were more interested in me learning how to make the gold chain on a fish more realistic rather than questioning why is the gold chain present in the first place.
Mm.
And so I changed programs to African American African Studies and studied media and the history of the power of media, particularly cartoons. And then I said, well, I want to make movies. Like, I want to make really conscious and thoughtful movies to make sure that folks are getting like good, complex stories. And then realized like I didn't like doing that. I didn't like it's kind of like it's kind of like seeing the Taj Mahal and decide you want to be a mason. And then you're
Mm.
just like, no, I just like the building. I don't want to build it.
That is great.
And so I was like, "No, I don't wanna do that." So then I became interested in how can I use art as a tool to help people question the stories that they have. And so I started working with museum educators and K-12 teachers to help them think about the visitors and the students and the communities those folks come from, and how is the story you create in your head coloring your interaction with them.
Will
And
you just say
so
that again? Because that's a powerful statement. Story in
yeah,
your
so
head. Yeah.
how is the story you created for the communities that you're serving coloring your interaction with them? What assumptions do you have around the students that came from this neighborhood
Right.
or the visitors that are look like this? That also is shaping docents or museum educators' choices in the art pieces that they go to. So if you've ever been on a tour in a museum, you don't look at all the art, right? So they're taking you to the art pieces that they've chosen to take you to. So they're also making assumptions around what I think you're interested in, or what I think you can grapple, what I think you can comprehend, or whatever kind of decisions and assumptions that they're making. And so then nonprofits and companies started to say, hey, well, we aren't teachers or museum educators, but we need to be thinking about the stories that we hold about the folks we work with. Who's getting promoted? Who's getting hired? Who's getting fired? Who's getting on a PIP? Who's getting a second chance?
Right.
Who's getting on stretch projects? And our leaders need to be thinking about the stories that they hold because that's shaping the dynamics of the workplace culture. And these are things that are outside of the actual policies of the organization. It's how we treat each other usually can't be put into rules. It's what's seen as normal, how we engage. And so now I work with organizations to help them with their workplace culture and help them slow down and realize what assumptions might be coloring their decisions.
Thank you for saying all of that. That's a journey to get to where you are. When you're talking about a PIP, that's some kind of performance review. And
Yes.
I once worked with an organization where every single person of color was on a performance review, and the white
Mm,
people were getting coaching, leadership
mm.
development. And that's a pretty direct example of how biases shape how we're treating people or their performance or looking into social conditioning that might shape the way they're performing and not looking at everything that needs to be looked at. So, and what are some of the ways that you help organizations do that?
I started wanting to go right into the complex, like difficult, hard work of what I call brave space and asking the hard questions, the complex questions. But I realized that most people need a real grounding foundational work. So I spent a lot of time doing what I call DEI 101. And it's like, what exactly is diversity? What is inclusion? What is equity? What is equality? What is white supremacy? What
Mhm.
is racism? What is all these different things that was coloring the engagement that people were having. So I imagine, let's just say that this organization where all the people of color were on PIPs and the white people were being coached. If the black people were calling out white supremacy or calling out uh, patriarchy or something, and all they hear is, all the white people hear is, you think I'm racist. I'm not racist. I have a black friend or whatever it is people say. It's like, that's not what this is. That's one way it shows up, but that's not how it's showing up here. And so giving folks language. And so I've now I still do that work, but now I made it into an asynchronous course so people can go and like take that. So now I prefer to work with organizations who've kind of laid that foundational work
Mhm.
and they really want to really think about how their policies align with their values and their mission, and ultimately determine behaviors that is shapes the expectations of the folks that are working in the organization. So you say you have the value of respect. But if you haven't defined that and associated behaviors with that, that can look like a whole host of things. So there's one assessment that I do around conflict and communication. And I use myself as an example. I'm a direct expressive. So that means when I talk, my voice is gonna go up and down, my hands are gonna move, like it's gonna be that. And also, I'm gonna go straight to the point to whatever it is I'm talking about, right? Now, if I said to you, let's say I'm your supervisor, and I say, okay, Suzanne, I need this report. I need it in at this amount of time. These are the resources that you need in order to get it done. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay, cool. In my mind, that directness was respect because I'm not wasting your time. I changed this 1 hour meeting to 15 minutes. Now, if your definition of respect is building trust on the front end of that conversation, which might look like, oh, Suzanne, I heard you went out of town. How was the vacation? I heard your dog was sick. Is everything okay? Like, how are you feeling? This kind of trust building on the front end. If that's what you call respect, then you're going to see me as disrespectful, right? Because we have two different definitions and two different behaviors. And so what would happen is when if we do 360 evaluations and you do an evaluation on me as your supervisor, you say, Melissa doesn't care about her team. All she does is care about this work getting done. She don't care about us as human beings. And in my mind, it's like, I care about you so much. I don't want to waste your time. And also I'm letting you know I'm here. Like I will give you whatever you need, but we don't need to spend 30 minutes talking about how you went to Aruba. No, we're not doing that. Right? But what we can do if we have language around these are the multiple ways in which respect can show up, right? Respect can look like having this conversation on the front end, and respect can look like this directness. So, what is it like for us as a team to talk to each other about the kind of respect that we require or that we need? And being
Mhm.
honest about that. So I might say, hey, I want to respect you by having this meeting 15 minutes. And you say, well, I really want us to get to know each other. So we might decide, all right, we can change this meeting from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. And that first 15 minutes, we do our icebreaker. Every meeting we do an icebreaker. Every meeting we go around and we ask an important question or something like that for us to get to know each other. Now we're flexible. So we came to this conversation with grace. We came to this conversation with curiosity instead of condemnation. And when we do that, we can build and we can reshape what's expected of us. But what happens, many organizations will have these kind of lofty terms like integrity, innovation, care, honesty, whatever, but they don't define it and they don't align behaviors with it. And those behaviors are going to change from uh or from person to person, right? Depending on where you are in the org chart and how much power you have.
Right.
So really thinking about how do we lay those out and hold people accountable to those clear standards.
So if you were going to hold like a team or an organizational accountable around respect, there would be like protocol around engaging with one another about the way that you do it and making sure you're having a shared agreement
Mhm.
so that people are coming together to include one another, not dominate one another, but include one another for the best outcome so people can still be themselves and still create together or build together. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that means people have to be willing to have the capacity to build bridges with people different from them and not see their way of engaging as the only way. Because it can be the reverse. I've also seen the reverse. The leader has a 2 hour meeting where that 90 minutes is about us like talking about our childhood best friend and things we like to do for hobbies. It's like, and the people who don't need that on the front end of a meeting, they feel disrespected because I could have been doing work,
Right.
right? Like I could have been doing something else. I want to get to know y'all in another setting, but right now we got to get this work done. And so, what does it look like for the person who thinks we should talk about our lives for 90 minutes and not see shrinking that down as now disrespectful? Because they see their way as the only way. And so that means people are going to have to expand what right looks like. They have to expand what appropriate team building or team engagement looks like. And so that sometimes is the hardest part. People can't get past themselves.
Especially, do you find that true when people have more power in position places? Does that make sense? Do you find that harder or not?
Harder in a different way. So if you have more power, then there's less push for you to be different
Right.
because there's a good chance however you were is what got you to that position. There are people with less power who might feel very adamant about how this team interaction is showing up, but there's no outlet for them to share that information, so they end up sharing it with me.
I
And
see.
so
And then you
they
do
can't
the
do anything
coaching
about it.
you do the coaching with the leader then.
Well, I'll do the coaching with whomever, right?
Right.
So,
But if the
so
leader's not doing it, it doesn't matter. I mean, some the as above, so below. The leader needs to be engaged and hold themselves accountable and hold the team accountable. Is that true?
Yes. So in an ideal situation, I'm working with the leader to reshape their lens. What happens if the leader is not open to that? They'll say so and so needs to be coached so they can get with the program.
Right.
And so then I'm coaching the person with less power to like think about how do you apply healthy assertion in your dynamic with your managers so that you aren't burned out, so they can change their lens too, so they're thinking
Mm.
this 2 hour meeting is disrespectful. How can you change your lens and say I don't need a 2 hour meeting, but I understand what this leader is trying to do here.
Will you talk about how you got the name for Mosaic Education Network and what each of those components means to you?
Actually, the name came from a homeschool co-op that I co-founded with some other parents. This was part of my dissertation. My dissertation was focused on how do you use art and community resources to teach for parents to teach their students, their young people. And
Mm.
so we call ourselves Mosaic because we're all different kinds of folks, putting our ideas and capacities and abilities together to support our children. Of course, we're educating, and we wanted to build this network not only just across the city, but across the nation. And
Mm.
so when we stopped the co op, I still like this idea of this complex way of thinking that multiple things can be true at the same time. We can source multiple points of information, and we can educate ourselves in a way that helps us move throughout the world, move throughout various networks for us to be with each other in a more healthy, stable, consistent way that may not be well, not may not, it won't be conflict free, but what does it look like for us to see that conflict simply as opportunities for growth as
Mm.
opposed to elements of disconnection. And so really thinking about what does that look like in a lot of facets in my work, whether it's how do we pull from a bunch of different histories, different applications. I use art and I'm working with a nonprofit, or I'm working with a company, but we're still thinking about these same things and pulling from all types of sources so they can be educated, and then they can take that information into their spheres of influence and kind of spread that information through their networks.
That's great. Thank you. You are making films, but not literal. Think about it.
Mm,
You are creating with, bringing in multiple resources, which would, in a film, you have to bring in different lenses and different opportunities to see things, or how are you going to portray this part of a scene, right? Or whatever you're going to do. You're doing that with in a living, dynamic way with people
mm,
and organizations and teams and networks, and doing it through a process that's, um, I would say, generative. Most people see conflict as destructive and divisive, whereas conflict is an opportunity and an opportunity for growth. We're not meant to agree on everything. That's boring. You know, I might like something you say and not agree with it, and I want to not. I want to be able to not agree with it and still like it and be over my, you know, world where I get to hear you and like still have my view. We
yes,
don't have to be against each other because of it,
exactly.
right? And how
We don't have to be against each other as long as your framework doesn't compromise my freedom.
would you
And I
say
think
that
that's
again? That's because I understand what you're saying, but that's a big statement that you just said. And I want to make sure our listeners can dive into it a little bit more deeply. So, would you just say that again and say a little bit more about it?
yeah, if your truth suffocates my truth, then they can't coexist. Something has to shift. And I think what people believe is, well, we can agree to disagree. And that's fine if we're talking about whether we wanna put pineapples on our pizza, okay?
Right.
But if it's whether or not my rights are respected, whether or not I should have an equitable process when it comes to access to resources and systems, if your truth means it limits my freedom, then there's something going on here that needs to be investigated. We need to be a little bit more honest about how your truth is damaging.
And if I was doing that, I would have to have a deeper commitment to want freedom for myself and for you to do that kind of work,
Yes, but
right?
most people don't have the capacity to do that. They think they do until the rubber hits the road.
Until the rubber hits the road.
What I call like, there are folks who want to get their social justice cookies, right? They want the gold star. They've been
Right.
doing, for them, they've been doing all the things. And then someone calls them out, like, well, you did a thing that was harmful. And they get defensive because they're not used to being called out. That's a muscle that has to be worked. That being called out and being able to stop, to be able to slow down and be like, is this a legitimate like point? Like, did I actually do that?
Right.
What does repair look like? Instead, it's like, do you know I marched with Martin Luther King? And like I've heard it all. Like,
I'm sure
like
you have.
and it's like that no one's taking that away from you. That is true. And also, you did this thing that was harmful. And so are you more interested in us in you doing better so you don't hurt again? Are you more interested in me coddling your feelings?
Yes, I agree to everything you're saying. And as a white person who has been called out and called in, I would say both. At first it was a kind of thing. And then I have to go, like, I am benefiting from a system that harms every day. And I'm acting out that harm right now. And that does not work. So I
Mhm.
do, that's why I'm saying, like, I I'm never gonna be perfect, so I know sometimes I hope my harm's, you know, not a big harm, but harm's harm, you know what I'm saying? I'm not Ku
Yeah,
Klux
yeah,
Klan harm,
yeah.
but it could be who I'm, positioning in the email and where. That is
Mhm,
something I've been called out for. "Oh, you put my name 3rd. Who did you
mm,
put before me?" It's like,
mm,
"Wow, I didn't see that." And then also learning on my side how to go do the work myself. Not,
mhm.
that's something else. Like at first I'd say like, do you want me to let you know what I've discovered? And most of the time I hear, no, I don't. Just go do the work, and then, or we can have the conversation about what would repair look like.
Yes.
And then am I willing to do the repair? And are you willing to tell me what needs to be repaired, or do you need an intermediary to get to me because you don't wanna deal with me because you've had enough of me or something like that? But there's all kinds of creative ways, but I think that if, if any of us really want to be as healthy as we can be, we have to be able to look at where we're harming, whether we're, harming ourselves or each other, or we're never gonna get better together.
Yes, and I think depending on, I know you folks are listening in the US and all over, being intentional about recognizing what are those oppressive dynamics that you might be taking for granted or as natural.
Yes.
So in the US, race and gender are big things, as they should be. But sometimes when we focus on that dynamic, we miss some other opportunities for marginalized people to recognize how they may be further marginalizing other marginalized folks.
Right.
And so, um, or their dynamics in some other country might be completely different. They might not, race might not be a thing. It might be around ethnic groups. It might be around class. It might be around your
Mhm.
region, what side of town, if you're in the country, if you're in the city, and what does that mean? What are those things that we're kind of taking for granted? Or we've normalized so much that we've decided that we're not going to take a look at it. And therefore we are playing into these harmful systems.
Well, Dr. Melissa Crum, I could talk with you all day long, but we're going to have to wind down for today. Thank you so much. I love to ask my guests this question. What do you think the purpose for life is?
I think everybody's purpose is something that you ultimately uncover that's connected to something outside of yourself.
Mm,
And that could be massive change that might happen, or it might be a small ripple that influences someone else. But really thinking about how you show up to ensure that not only you are continuing to grow, but that you are able to display that growth to others. So it encourages them to be better in whatever way is necessary so that those folks around them can also grow. So we can have the world that we say we want to have.
I love that. Thank you. When I'm listening to you here today, what I'm left with is that you're a fight for liberation for everyone.
Mhm.
Not a fight against, but a fight for. And that
Mhm.
you really believe through multiple sources, we can educate ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to create a thriving, living network of human beings. That's what I'm hearing listening to you today.
Absolutely. I believe it. I don't know if we're gonna see it in my lifetime, but I'm just gonna keep working
Keep
working at it.
working, keep working, keep working. But I'm so grateful to have you on today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
How can people get a hold of you?
Absolutely. You can go to my website, mosaiceducationnetwork.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Melissa Crum. I'd love to see you there.
And in the fall in Columbus, will you say when your event is? Because it's
Yes, we have the Brace-Based Leadership Conference happening at the Columbus Museum of Art on October 7th, a full-day professional development opportunity for us to explore how emotional intelligence and our story making shows up in our leadership practices. So if you are a leader who takes sharpening your skills seriously, we love to see you.
great. Thank you. And thanks once again for listening us here today on the Purpose for Life podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Roberts, and we are signing off for today.